Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for tuning in to the Talk About It Mate podcast.
In this podcast, we're letting you in on the ground floor of the next mental health revolution.
Fundamentally, people want to be seen and heard, and it doesn't take a professional to provide that.
Peer support is transforming people's lives, and we're going to show you how it's done.
We'll start each podcast with a check-in where we'll describe our here and now feelings.
Think how you would honestly respond if someone asked you, how are you?
Then, we'll choose a topic and talk, from our own experiences, about what that means to us.
No direct questions, no advice, no disagreement, just open listening and validation.
And at the end, we'll check out.
How are you now?
And that's it.
Well, alongside the podcast, we'll be providing support, guidance and connection around the topic each week on our social media and on our meetup. So head there now, during or after the podcast to get and stay connected.
But for now, let's get into it.
Right, mate. Good to see you.
Hi, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm feeling very relaxed. I slept very well last night, which is unusual for me.
No, I didn't, because the dog kept me up all night. And I was on the sofa, just been for a walk in the snow. And, when you come back and you're just like, I've got a million things to do, but you haven't really thought about it. And I'm like, but now I'm here and I've seen you, I feel a lot better.
I think I prefer those days, though, when I've got a million things to do. Because when I've got a million things I could do, it's a little bit more disconcerting than actually when you just have to get stuff done. And if anyone wasn't aware of when we filmed this, you've just set them right in the scene that it's snowing outside. So it's obviously
Winter Wonderland. Yeah.
But it's great to get started on this new season of the podcast. So why don't we just crack on and get straight to the first check-in of season 3 of the podcast. I'm feeling very positive today. Just a few things sort of lining up, a few little niggles earlier on in the week. I've got a new job starting soon that I'm pretty anxious about something going wrong, just because there's a lot in my mind riding on that happening after such a long period of being out of work. You know, we're coming off the back of the furlough and the pandemic situation. We're still in that. But, you know, for me, I've not actually been working for such a long time that I've had a lot of anxiety about that. But just a little conversation with my prospective boss, and I'm feeling a lot better, and I'm quite excited, actually. I would say that's my here and now feeling.
Do you know what I would say? And I've never used this word for me, but this phrase, laid back. I'm quite laid back. Like, yes, there's lots of things, but instead of seeing them as lots of potential banana skins, I'm kind of seeing them as lots of potential opportunities. And what a place to be for the very first podcast, you know, of this set, is that I'm starting off in a really laid back mood because I don't know if I'll ever feel like this again.
Well, maybe we should capture that and move straight into the conversation. It might feel a bit weird to us to start with this topic based on where we're both seemingly at today, but the topic for today in our 10 steps that mirror the sort of journey that we think we've been on and other people might be on is
loneliness.
I don't know if you've got any initial thoughts about loneliness that you might want to kick us off with.
Well, yeah, like if I'm coming at it I'm in quite a positive moment right now, but that's when you feel the least lonely, in my opinion. Like, because you feel so connected to your thoughts and feelings and what's going on and the things and then conversely, I can completely flip that and put myself in where even 6 or 7 days ago when I felt the complete opposite to this. And everything was worrying me and stressing me, and any kind of difficulties I've ever had with mental health have made me feel lonely. And when you feel lonely, even if you have a lot of people around you, you can feel lonely, and then you can feel vulnerable. And this is, I think, is a really good place to start for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think something there that you mentioned that I'd never really thought of before is this idea of being connected to your own thoughts and feelings as a opposite of feeling lonely, almost, or like a symptom of not being lonely, because actually that really is the worst loneliness, is that when you don't even feel connected to yourself, because then you haven't even got your own, when people talk about being your own biggest cheerleader, if you can't even back yourself, then you've got absolutely no one.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about, how can you impact your own personal situation, and on your good days you think, yeah, I've got this, I can do it, I can take actions to address these thoughts, feelings and things that are going on. And on bad days, you don't feel that you can. You are the same person, but you're almost two completely different versions of the same person.
That really reminds me of when I think about loneliness, I always think about those afternoons when I would wake up at a weekend and it would be literal loneliness in the sense that I'd be isolated in my bedroom, self-isolation in some respects, because I was choosing that over reaching out to, say, my housemates or people that I know would be there for me if I felt really low. But I was so depressed and so anxious because I'd self-medicated and overindulged the night before that I felt like an absolute different version of myself than I would want to identify with. If you'd met me the night before when I was in that process of seeking validation and throwing myself out there and meeting as many people as possible, you would have thought there's no way on earth this person would ever be anxious, would ever be depressed, because I'd appear as like the life and soul of the party.
I think we often put like a social mask on. I've been there. I used to be the fun time guy, and inside maybe I was a bit empty. I based all my things on other people's validation. But the loneliness aspect, yeah, drinking and being hungover, anxiety or whatever you want to call it, beer fear the next day is so, it grips you so tight that you don't know how to treat yourself with respect. I know in my situation, yeah, lots of negative self-talk, and why would I then want to let anybody else in on that? Because what have they got to gain from knowing what crappy stuff is going on in my head?
That's the transactional nature of, when we think about why we don't reach out. Because one thing that's stark to me is that in those moments where I felt really low, I know that there's a list of people that I could speak to. I know that my family and friends have all said, we're here. And especially now, there's this thing inside you when you're feeling like that, when you are feeling very self-critical and feeling like the worst version of yourself, that you're like, well, yeah, but what do they gain from this? And that's really an unhealthy way to think about it, because it shouldn't be about that, should it? It shouldn't be about gain or loss. It's a completely different, as human beings, our greatest moments and when we're not in it for something, we're just in it. That's
really helped me to kind of reflect on where I am now and where I used to be when I was more lonely and isolated, and I wouldn't let people in, and also the thought of even having to rake over the shit show that is the negative parts of your mind is really exhausting, and quite frankly I don't really want to do it half the time. Back then especially, what really to counteract the loneliness I would have needed is connection, a friendly chat with a mate or a cup of tea with somebody, or watch a movie, go to the cinema, like something to counteract that loneliness. It's the connection. Not everyone's going to want to come to a formal group and share their feelings openly, because maybe not right for them at that stage. But at the same time, we don't want to like say to people, you don't matter. And it's absolutely fine to just want to do some exercise or eat some chocolate or do something else, because if you're in a state of negativity, maybe just doing something differently can help. I know from my experience, can help get you out of that, even for a small amount of time.
I think it's scary to do something that feels so on the nose, like peer support or get counselling. Sometimes it's the stuff around it that can really feel like the stepping stone to really getting better. So if you put a different context around it, unfortunately for me, my context that I chose was nights out. That was my way of sort of, for a moment, not feeling alone, not feeling like my issues were the center of my universe, because there was other things to focus on. But if you can access things like, say, a walking club or a games club or a film club or a choir or something where you feel that connection through the medium of something else, then that can really help you make those other steps, or at least it has for people that we know and it has for me and you. But I think what's key in that is when you say connection, there's a massive difference between knowing that someone has acknowledged your suffering, so in a sympathetic way. So like I remember when I went through my rock bottom the first time around, I think I probably had two similar levels of rock bottom, and I posted on Facebook, I put this big heartfelt goodbye on Facebook, like, I'm leaving social media, I'm going to look after myself, I'm in a really bad way. And there was this outpouring of what I would describe as sympathy, and it for a moment made me feel not alone. But those interactions didn't develop into connections in the vast majority of cases. Yeah, I think sympathy generally is helpful to a very small degree. But really what you need to back that up with, if you're going to get help from someone or help from a community, is that real development of empathy and understanding and real listening. That's when connection can be absolutely vital to you not feeling on your own.
Yeah, that's making me reflect on the quality of connections I had, and I couldn't. I just wasn't in the right frame of mind back then when I had a breakdown, and to kind of open up to friends and family again, because they'll want to step in and they don't want you to feel that way, and so yeah, you've kind of opened up about the loneliness and the isolation that mental health troubles can bring, but that you kind of I was kind of putting, if I was doing that, I was maybe putting it onto them, as in subconsciously, I want you to save me, like, because that's because, and I can say it now, and it's actually quite empowering to say now, because I wasn't capable of doing that for myself back then, or the conditions weren't right for me to do it. Now, obviously, I can do it, and that's probably the thing I'm most proud of in my life, is that self-development, that I've got this. It was non-existent at people talking about mental health when I was 18 and I was diagnosed with depression, and that obviously marked me out as a black sheep, more so from my self-judgment and shame and guilt that came from it. Yeah, moving forward, the sympathy side of things never grabbed me, because it just didn't think it was real. It was like you're paying lip service to something, and for me, connection, I always knew a lot of people and met and hung out with a lot of people and text a lot of people, but really, how many of them were deeper connections? And yeah, I've got my I'd say lifelong friends, of which maybe 3 are left out of 7, and that shows that not all friends are lifelong friends. Whether it's because of things that I did or how they dealt with me at my lowest point, that I was almost forced into loneliness at some points by being open and honest, but not in a I want everybody to give me sympathy way. People didn't know how to handle that. So the connections that I was getting weren't working for me at that stage. And it wasn't until when I was in London, I took the onus, the impetus myself, and reached out for a counsellor. And then I went to a group in London, like a confidence and self-esteem group. And that was my first step. And trust me, John, I was absolutely bricking it.
I mean, I absolutely know that sensation of bricking it, taking that first step. I'm a relatively confident person around people and new situations. But coming to my first human group, turning up for yourself, showing up for yourself is just the scariest but most powerful thing a person can do. I think when you talk about these acquaintances almost, or even friends you might call them, why they didn't develop into deeper connections in regards, the real important stuff. And it doesn't just have to be mental health. It can be for the good times. It can be, for real support. It can be for anything, those deeper connections. Where does the responsibility lie in that? When I'm feeling shit, who is culpable if I continue to feel shit? When I first did that on Facebook and people did say, give me a call. If you're in London, come for dinner. I didn't give them a call. I didn't go for dinner. I didn't show up for myself. I didn't make use of that. So I can think, no one really helped me at that point if I was being angry and bitter about it, which I don't. I just wasn't ready to put my side of the bridge down. I wasn't ready to show up for myself. And then serendipitously and fantastically, when I was, your bridge was down. And I turned up to that meeting about a year ago, around about now. And I've talked about this so many times. It was one of those anxious days, one of those Saturday afternoons when I felt absolutely at my lowest mental state, and I could have easily stayed in bed. And I know that it was some of my negative people-pleasing attitudes that got me out of that bed, but equally I knew that showing up for myself on that day was going to be a really good thing, even if I didn't feel like it. And drove into town. It was raining, parked, couldn't find parking. I looked back on the conversation actually recently, and I was late and I was stressing. You have to buzz to get in, and it was just all these barriers that normally if I hadn't been ready would have probably dissuaded me. But I showed up, and my side of the bridge was down, your side of the bridge was down, and now a year later I can reflect and say, what a moment. What if that hadn't have happened?
it's like breaking through new barrier, a new like a threshold. Yeah, like I have my own like origin story or something, if you can call it that. I made the list. I'm going to get some help. I'd signed up to meet a counsellor. I met him for coffee. I was like, right, I've got my first counselling session. I'd been onto an app called Meetup. That's the first time I've been on because I'd only done it for football before. But then I saw confidence and self-esteem. I like RSVP'd to an event. And then, so I'd like done a nudge. I reckon I'd done like 10%, but that was my nudge. You know, I'd just clicked a button. So I'm still wavering there. You know, there's probably a good chance that I wasn't going to go to that event. You know, what if there was so many chances for me to back out, but then, the guy called Ken who ran that group, and he's like a coach, he messaged me and then he called me the next day as well. And he just followed through on it. And I don't know, I just chatted to him. He seemed very normal. I thought, I don't feel cut off or alienated from this conversation. I don't feel like anyone's trying to force anything on me either. And I thought, no, I'm going to go. And it was in like a basement of a building called London Jesus Centre. And I actually went to the wrong room first, which was for narcissism. This is a narcissism support group. I was like, oh, I don't need to be here. I was talking to someone outside. I was like, I don't think I'm in the right place. So then I walk into this other room, like you said, late. And the guy's doing like a talk and it was like, right. And I realised quite quickly, all of the other guys, I think there was like 5 or 6 of them in that room, had some kind of depression or anxiety. And it's the first time in my life I was like, oh, it's just so like good to just be like, I don't have to like hide it or like it can inconvenience anybody. And the guy was doing a talk. I remember he had a really bad speech impediment, and he said how he'd come on in like 3 or 4 months, and he gave a speech and like he'd obviously overcome such a barrier. And I stood up and said something. Well, I didn't even stand up. I just said something to the group, and 2 or 3 of the guys were like, Mike, you don't seem like the kind of guy who would have like you said, John. I was quite forthright, quite confident in many ways, but internally, like we all have our own struggles, and sometimes just by seeing other people who've also struggled, you know, if I would compare me to that guy who'd done that speech, like I was probably in a better position, and in a weird way, I was like, well, you know, at least I'm better off than this guy, and I know that sounded terrible at the time, but I didn't feel lonely because I connected with him, and then the next day, I don't know, I felt like I woke up the next day and just felt a little bit more, I just felt different.
The whole crux of why loneliness is so bad and why what we do is predominantly to alleviate loneliness is because actually advice, sympathy, things you can give and walk away from are nowhere near as helpful as shared experience and empathy. You can't alleviate loneliness with advice. You can't say, here's how you stop being alone, do this. The only way to, in my mind, alleviate a sense of loneliness is to be around perhaps other people who either are lonely or have felt lonely or don't feel lonely, and give you an insight into what that looks and feels like.
When people are the right kind of people to interact with, the connections, the deeper, meaningful connections that I've made, often have come from someone planting a seed. There are many people who I interact with through Talk About Mate and my other work that I do, and they'll come back to you 6 months down the line, 9 months, a year later, and they'll remember. I literally just come off a phone call before doing this. I'd given a guy a card when I was primary teaching and supply teaching. I'd given it to him. He was a PE teacher working for an external company, and his wife just called me. And I must have given that guy the card about a year ago.
The butterfly effect, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
Little things add up, and whether that's that it just takes time for that to land with someone, or whether it's a bunch of little things. I don't know if you've ever seen the meme that's like the guy pushing over a little domino into a big domino, but I saw one yesterday. The very bottom domino was a website to rate attractiveness of females on campus, and the final domino was insurrection at Washington DC Capitol. So it was showing that, you know, Mark Zuckerberg's incel status led to a civil war in America sort of 7 or 8 years ago through the medium of Facebook. But, you know, that idea that, you know, little things add up is so true. I talk about this all the time with anyone that gets me started on, oh, John, you seem in a much better place. Like, it all started with loneliness. I now no longer feel lonely. And to get there, I didn't do one big thing. I didn't go to like Tibet and study with monks for 6 months. And I didn't eat, pray, love it. I didn't go to rehab. I didn't, you know, cut everything out of my life. what I did was I started building a routine that meant that it was little and often, it was small things, showing up for myself now and then, coming to peer support. Because this relationship started off as me, yes, volunteering to be a part, talk about it, mate, but actually predominantly just starting off as a participant and just showing up once a week for an hour, just once a week, and then making the commitment to see a counsellor and invest that money, and making the commitment to not answer the question, are you okay, with a cursory, yes, no, I'm fine, yeah, whatever. Just little things. And over time, that's how you actually make a difference. If you do the big stuff, like it's the equivalent of you want to lose weight, so you do like a 72-hour water fast. All right, you might lose 6 or 7 pounds, but you'll never maintain that unless you've made the little and often type changes too. That just won't work. And for me, that's absolutely the biggest lesson that I've learned about this, and it was realized within the last couple of months. How do you test that little and often is working? It's very difficult. Until you're tested, you don't know. And there was a situation that came up in my personal life maybe 2 or 3 months ago that absolutely hit to the heart of my biggest insecurities and anxieties. And when I was strong enough to deal with that in an assertive, decisive, full of self-esteem kind of way, I went, whoa, there you go. There's some proof that I've done the work and there is actual tangible progress. And I couldn't have tested that without it coming up in that way. I didn't notice along the way that things were happening, but now I realize. And it all was to do with that little and often type stuff.
That's very powerful. And not to embarrass you, but like when we started the men's peer support groups back in March, April, like you came along and very, very quickly you took responsibility. Those little and often became quite evident. Some people say like, oh, I've not had anything to say, or I didn't really get a chance to speak tonight. There's an element of responsibility there. You took that responsibility on yourself to use that time in that group for your own development. But what happened very quickly with you, the penny dropped with you. You saw how important it was, but very, very quickly, and I don't even know that you noticed it, you were showing up for other people really, really quickly. Like the strength that you'd gained from that little and often, you were automatically just giving it to others. So like I was running the sessions, but actually it became very easy for me to run the sessions because you were there. And most of the guys I've seen that in, especially the ones who were heavily involved, and the women's group as well, like when you see that development of people taking responsibility, showing up little and often without expectations of what is going to happen, if you wait for everything to be right, you'll never do anything. It wasn't until probably my fourth therapist that I was at a stage where something bad had happened. I dropped out of a course. I was struggling. Old wounds had been opened. 6 or 7 weeks later, it was coming. She's I saw it coming. It was coming. And I just kept showing up, and I probably didn't know it was coming, but it came. I developed it, and I started to grow a lot from there. So, yeah, so I didn't want to embarrass you or anything, but that stages of people's process is that you are less likely to be lonely when you've developed the skills to reach out and connect in a safe way.
Peer support. If I ever say to someone, oh, you should come along to peer support, it's been amazing for me. The only image in my head I can imagine that those people are thinking, or that I would have thought before I became a part of Talk About It, mate, it's like, if you ever watch a film that has an Alcoholics Anonymous scene, or like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest when they have group therapy, and it's always a really drab, depressing, sort of claustrophobic atmosphere. It always makes me feel uneasy watching those scenes. But now I watch those and I think that is the complete antithesis of what I experience in peer support. Because when you were talking then about giving it back to others and really thinking about what that means in our community and how actually we operate, I see peer support as being like occupational health for mental health. I think you've brought up to me before that, if you break your leg or you have a serious car accident, you might need to walk on crutches or have a bar for a while, or have someone help you learn to walk again. And peer support is for me is like that. It's not that no one's growing your bones back. They're just with you until you can do it yourself. And it's a very, very positive experience. It doesn't feel like any of those dramatized versions of peer support that I can imagine, because actually giving other people strength gives you strength. You get so much out of peer support, even when it's not directly your support. We talk about, does altruism actually exist? Can you actually be selfless? Because every time you help someone else, you feel good about it. And peer support gives you the opportunity to either be helped or help someone else at every single opportunity. You're never alone, whether someone's coming to you or you're coming to them. It's just a complete symbiotic, back and forth, constantly flowing energy type situation. If it's working as it should, which, most of the time I find that it does in our community.
I fell into it very much so in that, like, I'm going to start a group, I'll do a blog, it becomes a group. It was like, try this, and it ended up to where it is. And yeah, you think therapy or group things are very like Alcoholics Anonymous or like it is in the movies. At the same time, there's this idea of everything being super, super, super positive all the time, which you'll see quite often, say, like Instagram. And as always, with any kind of polarised issue, the answer is usually somewhere in between. You can't go through the process without having to challenge yourself or go through something difficult. It's like our mind is messy and we're kind of working to sweep out the corners of our mind. And I really like that image. Like, it can't be perfect. So then the other side of this, like, I don't want to say toxic positivity, but like, just feel good. Like, these are the steps to feel good. I get that. Like, we're very much about lifting people up. But that also doesn't chime with me. There's work to be done. Here's a safe space, which will be somewhere in between to do it. This is what it might look like, but it can look like whatever you want it to look like. And I think we need to talk about this instead. It's not just the group, is it? It's like you could be taking on a hobby, or you can be in a healthier relationship with better boundaries. There's an infinite number of things that you can be done, and they're very personal to each person. So to get yourself out of loneliness, I believe, is taking ownership to do things or try things without putting too many expectations on what will happen. Just give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah, it's something that I experienced through my weight loss journey as well. It's the equivalent of, here's a magic diet pill. Just buy that and you'll be fine. Buy that and you will instantly drop 26 pounds and you'll have a six pack and you'll be dead sexy. That's the same to me as, here are the 5 steps to overcoming anxiety. Just do these 5 things, because you're wanting to connect with an idea rather than with yourself or with other people. And that is enforcing loneliness and enforcing that isolation, because you're disconnecting yourself from not only other people, but the very purpose of what we do, which is person-centered type approaches. I wouldn't call it necessarily therapy, because obviously we do lots and lots of different things. Rather than trying to tell people what to do, we're just with you until you can find the strength to feel like you're there. And you're never quite, there's no end to that journey, is there? But, that you feel stronger for just having that around you.
Consistent, small, positive acts build up like mental fitness, and I think this is an idea that I want to run with going forward. And again, this loneliness and isolation that can come from any problems that they're having with their mental health, but it's those small actions, and if you brand it almost as mental fitness, just small actions to advocate for yourself, and especially the guys who wouldn't normally talk about that, and the guys who thought I should be like, strong, good at sports, have a family, a good job, house, car, like those kind of guys who, and a lot of guys I'd say were like susceptible to say bottling up their feelings and then putting themselves in vulnerable positions or getting into debt and gambling and addictions and things like that. It's a build up of mental fitness through small positive acts. Men, I suppose, like to be grouped together doing things. Man versus Fat as a weight loss program is a good example. Being together and doing things together can be very, very empowering. And yeah, I just look at a guy who might come to 1 out of 3 of our meetings and just gets on with things, and might have bad days and might have good days, still is taking some positive actions, whether it's a difficult session or the best session you've ever been in. It shows a lot of courage, I think, on a daily basis just to do something like that. And yeah, maybe I could apply that for my diet or something, like the way that I eat. I don't eat enough fruit. Maybe if I just have a banana and an apple a day and build it up from there. It often is just small, simple, positive actions can alleviate, the loneliness.
I think sometimes we think with alleviating any issue, and loneliness probably being the heart of most mental health issues, I would say, or the biggest symptom of most mental health issues. It doesn't have to be as it is purported in a lot of masculine culture, especially if you look at the sports documentary, All or Nothing. When you think about sport, when you think about achievement, it is considered in that way. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So if you're looking to combat loneliness, little acts of self-compassion and courage, one after the other, as quickly as you can go or as slowly as you have to, can lead to dramatic changes in your outlook. And on that note, I guess little and often throughout this conversation, maybe we should think about checking out, seeing how we're feeling here and now, and reflecting on how we might have changed through the conversation.
I felt very laid back to begin with. I've shifted, I feel like, back more to my kind of, not anxious self, but there's an urgency about me that's come probably as I've been motivated by this chat, really. It is to like keep going with the projects. Yeah, I just feel quite motivated, I'd say, is the word that I'm checking out with.
It's difficult not to end every conversation with you with a checkout like that. Yeah, I think always when we have these conversations, I feel present and energized. I'd say beyond that, I'm feeling more aware of where I was actually than when I checked in. Like when I checked in, I thought I was in a particular place, but actually as this conversation went along, it sort of unraveled things in me. So actually I'm feeling a bit more awake, maybe. I don't know if that would count as an emotion. Like I think I came into the conversation a bit more lost in my head than I probably realized. I think sometimes that's the power of just speaking, can wake you up to how you're actually feeling. So that's how I'm feeling right now. And yeah, it's been a great conversation. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one, and I'm looking forward for what's to come.
Lots of exciting things to come. Lots of exciting things going on in the community, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate your interest in what we do. If you would like to hear more, please subscribe, share, or review this podcast. And if you'd like to have a chat, join a session, or just have some fun, then come find us at Talk About It Mate on all social media.